Hello and welcome to a replay review for Glorious Hammer, patron on Patreon, and you can see here quite an evenly matched game. He's playing Seraphim. He's got just under 1,000 rating. I checked the leaderboards. He's got around 500 global games and about 300 ladder games, so quite a few games, but not a massive amount on ladder. So let's take a look at what happens in the game, try and point out the most clear-cut important errors, see the upsides of his play as well, because I did see some good things in here. Good things and bad things, of course, as in any replay. So let's see, the build queue obviously is important. We had 3 engineers, followed by a scout and a tank, followed by 3 engineers, scout and a tank, and then it was a repeat after that. So it's a bit greedy when you're going second air, I would say. It's a bit risky. You could get raided here. You can't cover everything. That's for sure. You definitely can't. And you don't really have enough scouts to see everything. You only have 1 scout early on, and the second scout will take quite a while to come out. So it's a bit risky. Now, I would definitely suggest using the rally point on the first factory to send units where you want them, or at least just make sure you know which side of the factory they're coming out of. So if you're sending the first guy over here, you should have the factory to the left so that they build and walk out the left, and so on. Okay, most important thing, you can't build a second factory with 4 PGens, whether it's land, air, sea. This is just a fundamental mistake. We can't have 4 PGens and then build a second factory unless we are reclaiming tree groups extremely quickly. So this is an error, right? So here's what you can do is, right? Let's say you've made this mistake. The point is to first avoid mistakes, of course, especially major ones like this. And then second, if you do make the mistakes, to correct them as quickly and effectively as possible. So in this scenario, you could make engineers out of this factory. Maybe you just forgot, you make a mistake and you make too few PGens. So the air factory should now make engineers. You will still stall power, but you should not make air out of this. Now Matthew does start making a bomber. He decides, screw it, I made the air factory, so I'm gonna make air. But that's a major error. And the opening is obviously hugely important and will color the rest of the game. I start this poorly, I would lose every game at my level if I opened like this. I could lose to players much worse than me with it opening like this. So yeah, we're gonna stall heavily, and we have an idle engineer here. This engineer should be helping the ACU to simply just build power, because as you can see, if you have 0 power in the bank and you have plus mass, growing mass, then that means power is what's needed. You need PGens. Your mass and energy should go into more energy. Now again, we could still fix our problems by making engineers out of this factory. Maybe it's like, I really want this bomber because it's going to do a lot of damage. Maybe that's the thought process. But even if it is, after the bomber's made, make anti-air out of this thing and make engineers out of this perhaps. Also, this is another reason. This engineer is sort of hidden in between everything, because the rally point wasn't changed. So now you still have no idea that this engineer is here. You should be keeping quite a close eye on this thing on the right to see if you have idle engies and idle factories. It'll be a big help. But right now, the build is a gigantic issue. And really is setting you up so poorly for the rest of the game. I mean, you have more mass right now because you got mid reclaim, because you manually reclaimed here, because you manually reclaimed here. Unfortunately, a lot of that mass just got overflowed, and our mexes are generating less mass than they should, because if you power stall, your mexes generate less mass because they actually take energy to extract the mass. And we got a kill on the expanding engineer, so that's obviously a good way to use the bomber. But yeah, it's economy issues are the main thing. This engineer's still idle, by the way. So yes, build is clearly the issue. If we look at how many factories the opponent has, let's see what he's got. He actually only has 2 land factories and an air factory. Oh no, he's got 1 land. Yeah, this is not great. But he has got other factories. His economy is also not great, but yes. On Twin Rivers, you see, you need a lot of power. Okay, oh, you made a hydro. Yeah, on Twin Rivers, you need quite a lot of power because you have a lot of mexes, and they're quite close to you. So you need to really make a lot of P-gens and keep making them basically until you reach T2 stage and you're making T2 power. You basically need to be generally making T1 power most, if not all the time. Back here, this is an error as well. So first, 1 engineer making a hydro takes a long time. It's like a minute and a half, minute 20. That's a long time. Plus a factory is another, what, minute? Yeah. And all that time, you're not getting 6 mexes, and you're not getting reclaim back here, for example. So this is not a good idea. You should not send 1 engineer on a task that will take this long. You should send multiple engineers to the back to get the hydro, build a factory, get the mexes as well. Because there's no reason you shouldn't have this. You should have all of this mass already. So you're like 6 mexes behind if nothing else is different. Out of your factory, I think you should probably not attack move, because you'll forget about the engineers. They won't show up over here. Attack moving into random single trees is not an effective use of engineers. They can't really... They just don't get much resources from these trees. So now our economy is sort of fixed-ish. We have a lot of mass. We could have many more factories. We could also have a mass extractor upgrading right now. Wouldn't be a bad idea on a map like this. Twin Rivers is quite easy to defend here. Most of your mass is here. Not much mass in the middle. It's hard to hold on to mass in the middle even if you do get it. But as you can see, at this point we're already behind. Okay, we're using air, that's nice. And getting a nice raid into the expansion. This is quite good. This is a nice little raid. We're going to kill an engineer. Maybe? Oh, he escaped. But yeah, that's a decent raid. But the opponent has a factory, so he should be able to build his stuff quickly. If you find your raid is getting caught here, then just run back to this corner so that tanks have to go as far into the corner as possible, so they can't... Well, you know, if he has to send his tanks back here, they're not on the front fighting you, so... That's what you should do. If you can't win a battle with your raid, then just run away as far as you can away from your own base and force them to chase you. We got bombers, which is good because we're against Aeon, and we should probably be thinking about Tech 2 land. But yeah, now the economy, this is where it needs to be. This is a much better look. We're using the mass that's in our bank and we're not overflowing lots of energy. So that's quite good. Now we're still slow on grabbing, say, these mexes. These mexes should have been taken, certainly. That's these are still issues. Empty mech spots are always a major issue that needs to be resolved. T2 mechs is a good idea. And mainly it seems like you're focusing on microing your units, and you're doing a decent job as well at that. You're getting some reasonably good fights. In some cases, very nice fights. But the economy is, well, the empty mech spots are the main issue here. So we should be thinking about the sides now. I see you have a transport queued up, which is good. You should, once the transport's done, my advice would be to send your inties and a scout over. You should scout, well, you should scout the main base, because right now you're very blind. You don't know how much economy your opponent has. You don't know if your opponent is going T2 land or air, and you do need to know that. And you've had scouts, so send them in. You just need to basically early on in the game get the signatures of the factories and the mexes, so that you know as they're upgrading, and then you can track your opponent's economy. And that is a major amount of information that you really require to make effective choices in the game. So again, just a lot of T1 battles which are sort of going your way in general. Still no T2 land. We do have a little bit of economy, which is good, and your eco balance has been pretty good for the past couple of minutes. Okay, 2 PDs down here on this side is not really necessary, but it's obviously not a huge issue. It is certainly a waste in my view. Okay, transport is done immediately. It picks up what? Some engineers. Okay, my advice here would be to also pick up the nearby tanks and a couple of Zooies. You can fit 8 T1 units on a Seraphim transport, so I would just pick up the units that come out of the factory and drop them with the engineers. So now we're scouting ahead, that's good. Scouting ahead to see if there's anything there. Definitely bring some tanks. You see they're right next to you, so you don't need to wait around to load them up. And then you see if you probably drop them all here. Okay, let's see this battle. That looks like a very good fight for you. Yeah, that's an extremely good fight. So nice. The unit micro is good. You're doing good damage with the units. Ah, okay. Time for our eco to tank once again. You can't afford to make an upgrade. So, as I said, you basically need to be making T1 power all the way up to till you have the T2 engineers to make T2 power. You stopped making T1 P-gens. You sort of made them just with your factories here in a little pattern. But really you shouldn't have ever stopped really making T1 power, because this map scales. It's almost certainly going to get to T2 stage. It's very likely to get to T3 stage. So you need to be upgrading, you need to be constantly making more power, because you're going to be upgrading mexes, and you're going to want to make AC upgrades like this one. Now, you've taken some very bad fights here, by the way. And this also is a very bad fight. There's a PD, there's units, and he's got factories and engineers. He's just going to reclaim these units immediately. And his ACU is there. So yeah, again, fixing your mistakes. You can't afford this upgrade, so when you start it and you see you go to minus 500, cancel the upgrade. It's not a good idea to make that. It's just not. You should cancel the upgrade and immediately go home to your base. I mean, not send your ACU home, but go back to your base and grab the engineers and start building P-gens. You're also lacking engineers in the base, by the way. We need a factory spamming engineers. Looks like we lost air as well, which is not surprising. If you don't have much power, you're not going to hold on to air. But you got the top island. Radar is necessary, so you can see if he drops. And we're taking this other island as well. Now the problem still is, okay, we finished the gun, but because the eco management hasn't been there, we are far behind, and you have no idea what he has. He could have 6, 9, 6, 11, 12 T2 mexes. He could do. He certainly has T2 land, and I didn't see when that upgraded either, to be honest. But if we just quickly go to his view, he's got 6 T2 mexes, and he's got storages, and he hasn't got T2 land. He's actually got T3 land, so it's not unusual to expect this from an Aeon player to be making T3 land pretty quickly. But we have no idea, so we're out here with a gun commander and no T2 land, and we're taking the islands thinking that this is going great, but you haven't scouted at all. Your opponent has made eco much more effectively than you, and just gone straight to T3, and he's a T3 when you're a T2. Also his factory's idle. Always queue up some units in the HQ before it finishes. Like, queue up the upgrade and then units afterwards, so that you don't ever leave your HQ idle. It's idle enough as it's upgrading, you don't need to extend the idle time. And yeah, we have a gun comm and the enemy has snipers, so that's a bad look. Now if he made shields, then there'd be no way we can kill these snipers. But at least now, if we knew they existed, we could T1 bomb them, and that would be really effective. Force your opponent to try and dodge T1 bombers or have enough air and anti-air to stop you, but it'd be hard to stop all of them. So, but again, we have no idea. And what's letting you down is your economy, basically. So for one, not grabbing the back mass extractors, major issue. Them not grabbing the front extractors. I mean, the very first portion of the game, 4 P-gens and then second air bomber, not possible ever to do unless you literally have an entire forest right next to you. That's the only scenario where you can get away with something like that. And we're just gonna die to snipers. Now, the hill here is actually saving us right now. You can see the sniper just over the hill. But now they're hitting. And we're losing health really rapidly. So, yes. Somehow the ACU from the opponent is right in range of us, which should never have happened. He has no upgrades either. He's about to get a veteran seed. There it goes. But this is going to be close. You're dropping very low. 2,000. Enemy is on 4.5k. He's not gonna get drawn. Yes. Oh, that guy didn't get switched to a Civ. Okay, we were making T2P gen. Yeah, so a few major problems. Again, the mexes at the back not being taken. The mexes are more valuable than the factory, certainly, and probably I would say more valuable than the hydro probably as well. Generally you go mexes and hydro, and then you build a factory after the resources, because the factory doesn't do much for you back there, honestly. The early economy, you need more power in your opening build for sure, and then you can afford to assist the commander and build factories more quickly. Need to recognize when your economy is in trouble and rectify it sooner, And we also need to scout. We have no idea what's happening. You're spending a lot of your time taking T1 battles, and you're taking battles pretty well, but again, what did it earn you? You didn't actually, for example, take this reclaim that was generated. You didn't get into the expansion except for the very first raid, which made it through with a few times, and that didn't kill much. So these things were ineffective uses of your attention. You need to make sure the economy is correct and that you know what your opponent is doing. Because, I mean, he didn't care about random T1 battles once he got snipers out and T2 mexes in the back. Like, if you knew about these earlier, it would be the easiest thing in the world for you to have gotten some Zooies into the back with a drop from either side and do huge damage. Because he's very vulnerable here. He had no defenses whatsoever. There's a T2 Pigeon that could be killed quickly, a lot of T2 mexes, so then, you know, making a gun comm without any possible, well, just very, very little energy to build it was also a major mistake. So, yeah, plenty of things to improve on, but in general, what you did made a decent amount of sense. The problem is just, you know, well, you're sort of playing blind with no scouting, and the eco management needs improvement. So that's it for this review. Thanks, Matthew, for the support on Patreon, and I know you sent me another one. We'll take a look at that shortly. So talk to you soon. Till next time.